Hello and welcome to Vergecast, the flagship podcast of manufacturing in southeastern Wisconsin. We're going to go deep today on concrete, on blue-collar jobs, bringing America back from wherever it was.
And then we get a big globe, right?
A huge, tiny dome.
Yeah, a dome, excuse me.
It's a dome. What I'm talking about, of course, is Foxconn in my hometown of Racine, Wisconsin, the literal place where I grew up. We're going to get to it. Mm-hmm. It's really just a victory lap for me personally because Foxconn has not done anything else. Like, actually, quite notably, the news is that someone else has done stuff on that site in Wisconsin.
Nilay, do you think you're the most famous resident of Racine, Wisconsin at this moment in time?
No, the most famous people from Racine, Wisconsin is the bad team in the movie A League of Their Own.
Oh, that's good. That's really good.
Easily the most famous Racine...
Yeah, you're never topping that.
Thing is that, what's her name? Is it Lori Petty?
Yeah, Lori Petty. She goes to the other team.
I don't remember her character's name. I just know it's Lori Petty.
Yeah.
She goes to the Racine Bells and then has to pitch against her sister, Gina Davis.
That's correct.
And Jeff Bridges is already dead and the bus can't go slower than 55 miles an hour. That's not in the movie at all.
They're all the same.
That is a straight reference to Dressed to Kill by Eddie Izzard. And if you get it, I love you and you are my people and you can just send me a note and I'll send you a t-shirt. But you have to be able to tell me exactly what it is. Okay, that's that whole thing. The other most famous resident of Racine, Wisconsin is, of course, Sam Johnson of Johnson's Wax fame, who did some weird stuff in a plane over Central America and built a wax fortune that started the high school I went to, whose PBX system was connected to the SC Johnson Company. So you could pick up any phone in the school and dial 4 digits and get a J-Wax VP. I don't know why I know that information.
That was some deep Racine lore.
Wow.
Just
Was that who you would prank call in?
I got kicked out of that high school a lot.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Just flatly kicked out of that school a lot. Anyway, that's coming later in the show, not the Johnson Wax stuff, the Foxconn stuff.
That's much later in the show.
There is iPad news, like a lot of iPad news to talk to, but in a small way. We'll get to it. Cranz, the streaming movie industry, the television industry, in a moment of I would say, turmoil.
yeah, they realize they have to make money.
That's a problem. So we're going to talk about that. And then we got a lightning round, just shockwaves in the lightning round, which is unsponsored again this week. So if between now and the lightning round, if you've got money to spend.
We have gotten some interest, though. I will say, if you want to throw money at us, let's start a bidding war because it's coming.
Yeah, and we'll do it live on the air. That'll be the lightning round.
Love it.
A recursive lightning round sponsored by the people.
Wait, does that mean we get to do the bidding voice?
You know you can go to classes for those? I saw a TikTok. Anyway, none of that is important. By the way, I'm your friend Nilay. Alex Cranz is here.
I'm your friend who really wants to be one of those guys.
Auctioneer. The word you're looking for is auctioneer.
The bubba guy is like Elmer Fudd. That's
no, that's a Kid Rock song. David Pierce is here.
Hi.
Okay.
Lovely to be here.
All right. So this week, the news is that Apple had like a warm-up event for WWDC. I don't even know what else to call it. It felt like a warm-up.
Like crack their knuckles.
They're like, here's some stuff. We got to get this stuff out of the way. They ran a 35-minute infomercial for new iPads. At this point, Apple loves the infomercial event, but they had some watch parties. David went to one in New York. You got to sit down, watch the infomercial, spend some time with the new hardware. But all of it, even at the end of the event, I feel like it's important to contextualize this event by noting that at the end of the iPad infomercial, Tim Cook came back on the screen and said, "We will have much more to say about the future of our platforms at WWDC." Because the thing that needs to change on the iPad is iPad OS. And they announced no changes to iPad OS at this event.
Nope.
So it just felt like, here's part one of the story.
Follow for part 2.
Yeah, you watched all of Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning. Can't wait till next year. Like, that's basically how that felt.
Yeah.
It was odd, I think. And I went in thinking there must be something. And we got, to be fair, little teeny tiny bits of software, right? There was new Final Cut and new Logic. There's a new app called Final Cut Camera that works. So there's like tiny bits of things that you can do. But the overwhelming question for the iPad for like damn near a decade at this point has been, what am I supposed to do with all of this power in this thing?
Yeah.
And we did not get a lot of, I would say, new compelling answers to those questions.
I would say, in fact, we got none. And I want to come to that because, we have to review these things. And I think there's a question mark at the end of this review. And the question mark is like, what if they add a bunch of AI features in June, right? Like, who knows? But let's actually talk about what they announced. They basically refreshed the entire lineup, save the Mini. It's actually very funny if you go to apple.com right now and click on iPad. All of the iPads have the word new under them. And it feels like the Mini should have the word old under it.
The Mini did at least it was like in the last 20 words that Tim Cook said in the whole thing, he said the words iPad Mini out loud, which made me happy because that at least is some acknowledgement that it exists and will continue to exist. But that was it. That was the entirety of the love for the iPad Mini at this event, and that made me sad.
They just refreshed it last year? I'm trying to remember when I bought mine. Was it last year?
It was like 2 years ago.
It was 2022 sometime. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And they make that product entirely, as I understand it, for pilots to strap to their legs while they fly planes. So whatever. The Mini aside, dear sweet Mini, the base model's refresh, in so much as it a refresh, is that they dropped the price to the $349, which is important because that's probably where it should have been. They got rid of the 9th gen, which they were selling for $329. That's one with the lightning connector and the headphone jack. No iPads Apple is selling right now have a headphone jack, which I think is nightmarish for parents. I know I have a lot of dongle apologists in my mentions, but if you have a small child and you are ever traveling with the child, managing Bluetooth headphones for a child, it's just like no fun. Like, and charging a thing, like it's just easier to have the analog connector. Please don't tell me about your USB-C dongles. I don't care, man. I don't care that you're in the pocket a big dongle. It's just not my problem. Anyhow, that's the big refresh there. And I think it's important they brought that price down. Mm-hmm. Then the iPad Air feels like a very subtle refresh. David, what'd they do there?
Yeah, it's I would say subtle refresh is basically right. The big change is that now there's a bigger one. There's now a 13-inch version of the iPad Air. It has an M2 chip. It comes in a couple of new colors, but it is still very much an iPad Air, right? Like this is, I think, the iPad that Apple wants most people to buy, which is why it has the new colors. It has the Magic Keyboard. It has the pencil. It is kind of the sort of most mid of all of the iPads. And that is very much what Apple wants it to be. And yeah, it's $599 for the 11-inch, $799 for the 13-inch. And they're very much doing like a MacBook Air, MacBook Pro thing with these devices where you have the sort of slightly less powerful, cheaper, simpler computer in two sizes, and then you have the more pro thing with all the advanced specs for a lot more money, still at the same two sizes. But they've landed on this 11 and 13-inch thing as like the way going forward.
But I just don't understand why anyone would buy the Air when the regular iPad exists and is got like what? It's got the same, or it's got an A14. Okay, the iPad Air has an M2. Does that really matter to 90% of people who are using an iPad?
No, which is back to what you were saying, Nilay, a minute ago. Apple would like you to believe that it matters. And Apple would love to tell you stories about all the power of its new chips and why this stuff matters. And we're going to get to the Pro in a minute, which has an even newer chip. And I spent a lot of time with Apple executives learning about the wonders of the new chip. If you're just like a person who does normal iPad things in the world, I cannot in good conscience tell you a processor upgrade in your iPad is worth it.
Yeah.
And so I think that is the question. It's like, I think Apple would very much like you to buy the Air. And I think Apple thinks the Air is the correct one for the largest number of people. But it still feels a little like tweener-ish to me for a lot of things.
I found some differences between the Air and the 10th gen iPad.
Okay.
The hover function on the new Apple Pencil will work on the Air.
Yeah, it's a bunch of pencil stuff.
Yeah, it's like
the original, the 10th gen iPad is a USB-C doofus pencil.
Yeah.
And it has the other smart keyboard or the Magic Keyboard. Mm-hmm. And that's it.
And it 100 nits brighter.
Sure.
P3 instead of sRGB.
Hey, that matters to me.
Yeah, that does, like that, and the fact that it has anti-reflective coating. Those two things do actually
Well,
matter.
it's a slightly nicer product that uses slightly newer accessories.
But again, by the time you're down this road of any of this stuff, you're way beyond the average, I just need an iPad to look at while I sit on the couch user, right? Like, to me, it's like, if you're even thinking about buying a Magic Keyboard, buy the Air or higher, period.
Yep.
Right? Like, I think that's fairly simple. I think a lot of people who want iPads don't want anything other than the pane of glass to hold in their hands. And for most of those people, I can't think of a single reason the Air is going to be like meaningfully better for you in your life than the regular iPad.
Yeah, and I think this points to just the problem, which is what is the use case for the iPad? And now, again, the hardware suggests that it is an expansive list of use cases. And to some extent, it is, right? Like, some people, I am sure, produce music in Logic exclusively on an iPad. Those people are causing themselves an enormous amount of pain, but they're choosing to do it, and that is their right as Americans.
Sure.
Fine, right? It's just here at the bottom of the range, the step from the 10th gen to the Air is very small hardware-wise.
Right.
It is a nicer piece of hardware. It is a bigger screen. Mm-hmm. You can get now an even bigger screen, but it's a very mild refresh. And basically, they have added the 13-inch size. Fine.
Yeah.
But the capabilities of the product are exactly the same as they were yesterday or the day before.
Yep.
It's the iPad Pro and now the Pencil Pro. Where like now the purpose of this event, it felt like, was to simplify this increasingly complicated lineup. And you get to the iPad Pro and the Pencil Pro and the fact that Apple now sells, I think, 4 different pencils. And you're just like, what is going on here?
The pencils are really bad. Like the chart of which pencil works with which product and has which feature. Like, no, if you have a chart that big for an Apple product, you've messed up.
Yeah. Let's get into there's that. Let's talk about the philosophy of the iPad in a second.
Sorry.
The iPad Pro is a piece of hardware, appears to be very impressive. David, you've seen it. Tell us about it.
It's so good. We go to a lot of these events, right? And you're constantly being handed a thing that somebody has just spent a half hour telling you is new. And most of the time you're just like, this is a MacBook. Like, I've seen it. It sure is. And the iPad is like the canonical example of that, right? Like, for years and years and years, you pick up an iPad and you're like, boy, that sure is an iPad. I picked up the iPad Pro at this event in New York and, like, out loud, involuntarily just said, holy shit.
Ooh.
Like, it is so thin and so light and so small, especially on the 13-inch. It's the biggest, like, leap forward in how impressive I find this hardware in a really long time. Again, we can debate forever the value of any of this hardware, but just the sheer, like, engineering feat to get this thing under a pound. It's 5.1 millimeters thick. By the way, everybody says 5.1 millimeters thin now, and I think we've complained about that. That's nothing. Things are not, you can't measure the thinness of something. It's thickness, and there's not much of it, which is
Steve Jobs started doing this with I believe the 2nd generation MacBook Air.
I hate it so much. And everybody does this now, and it drives me insane. But that's neither here nor there.
It's 5.1 millimeters, but that's the 13-inch?
Yeah, and the 11-inch, I believe, is 5.3.
Yeah. Okay.
But the point is, they're spectacular. Like, truly, as pieces of hardware, they are incredibly impressive. To the point where you're holding the thing, and, like, everybody has made this joke. Marquez Brownlee, when he made a video, had the Jerry Rig Everything guy just sort of peek out from the corner of the video. Like, it feels like you could snap this thing in half. Whether or not you can, I don't know. If you can, that feels like a problem. But yeah, just the sheer machinery inside of this thing is really, really, really impressive.
Yeah. And there's 2 pieces I think that are important to call out. One is the new processor, the M4, which is interesting just sort of from a processor technology standpoint. Apple didn't put an M3 in this. If you read Ben Thompson in Stratechery, he points out that the M3 is on a 3 nanometer process node from TSMC that was a technology dead end.
Yeah.
And TSMC has all but admitted it. And the M4 is on the one that is sustainable and has a future. So TSMC was like, we made this weird dead end because we have customers who insist on being at the leading edge. there's one customer that insists on being at the leading edge. So they made so the M3 could be in whatever computers it was in, and the M4 is the leap to the good version of the 3 nanometer node that has like a roadmap in front of it. So you see Apple is trying, they're putting the stuff, like the best stuff they got into this machine. And then on top of that, it has the tandem OLED. People have been talking about stacked OLED displays for a very long time. It's a really simple idea. Like it's like deceptively simple. Obviously it's taken a long time to pull off. But if you run an OLED at the brightness you want to run an OLED, it gets hot, you risk burn-in. So why don't we just take 2 OLED displays, basically combine their power source, and then we just run them each at half brightness on top of each other to
It's
get
like real Pimp My Ride, like thinking there.
It's very clever. And then what you can do, and David, I'm very curious for this because I haven't seen it. I know you have. If you run them both at top brightness, you get a much brighter OLED display, which is that I think is the promise and the thing that people have been trying to work on for a long time.
Yeah, it was tough to tell. I mean, these Apple events are always lit really bizarrely in such a way that it's really hard to sort of get in the nitty gritty pixels of a display. But it was noticeably brighter. Like I brought my 11-inch Pro from last generation with me, and like just holding the two things side by side, you can tell how much brighter the OLED is. I think they said it's 1600 nits at full brightness, which is a lot. I assume we'll just shred your battery to bits at full brightness, because like you're running that many OLED pixels at full brightness, like. You're like, I'm gonna watch one episode of something and it's just gonna shatter the battery.
Well, no, but this is the idea though, is that you get more efficiency. Maybe at the top brightness where you're running effectively both panels all the way. But the idea is that sort of at your everyday brightness, right, you're running both panels like halfway.
Right. And that's also a big part of the reason that the M4 and the tandem OLED are happening simultaneously. Like the overwhelming thing I heard talking to folks at this event was that like we couldn't do one of these without the other. That driving those two displays at that high resolution and that high refresh rate is just a massive amount of computational work, and doing those two things, especially in a way that is like at all power efficient, is just really hard. And that a lot of what the M4 is explicitly about driving the tandem OLED, which I think is really interesting. And I wonder what that says about like the next set of products that might have M4s inside.
What kind of MacBook do you make if you've got a big tandem OLED driver sitting on your chip, right?
The big ass battery.
Yeah,
exactly.
It is just going to be one of those like 100 milliamp hour
Oh yeah.
Anchor batteries with the screen that folds out of it. I would take that product. If they made this twice as thick and got rid of the camera bump and was like the battery lasts for a week, I would be happy.
Yeah.
I do agree with that. I mean, there was a very funny thing where, you know, you hold this thing and it's a remarkable piece of technology. Like they built the hell out of the hardware. But then I'm like, okay, if this thing was a little thicker so that it didn't have a camera bump, which is the thing a lot of people pointed out, was this could have been the thickness of the camera bump and would have been about the same thickness as the last iPad, which no one was complaining about the thickness of, by the way.
Yeah.
And you'd get more battery. You might get more power efficiency out of it. You'd get better speakers just because there's room to move the audio around. That like maybe this constant thrust toward thinness that Apple has been on for so long is actually not the right strategy.
Yeah.
And I largely agree with that, but like, goddamn, is it cool just to hold the thing when it's that thin?
This thing, you are Johnny Ive-pilled. This thing is
Yeah.
like Ive's revenge.
It kind
He's
of.
like, here's what
honestly,
happens.
yeah.
You pick up an iPhone 6 and it flops over, but damn, is it thin.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much.
Fine.
Yeah.
And then there's new accessories, right? So there's the Apple Pencil Pro, which adds the ability to do a barrel roll.
Do a barrel roll.
You can also squeeze it. Love to squeeze a pencil. When I think about totally natural user interfaces, it's squeezing a pen.
Yeah.
Wait, can I just say two things about the pencil?
Yeah.
One, the squeeze is actually pretty nice. They put
course
a
it is.
real like haptic engine into it, so it feels like a MacBook trackpad now, in the sense that you get a little bit of that response. I don't know that it adds wildly to the experience of using it, but it does feel nice to squeeze the thing. The other thing is, Apple is very excited about the developer possibilities for this. There are going to be APIs that you can just give to any app, and they're going to be able to do stuff with the squeeze. And I just like casually threw out the example of like, oh, I can't wait to use my pencil to change the Spotify song. And somebody just goes, interesting idea. And I was like, no, that was a joke. That's a bad idea. No one should do that. So there's going to be some like deeply weird pencil gesture support stuff going on, and they're going to be able to chain gestures on the pencil to shortcuts. So all the shortcut nerds are really excited about this now. It's going to get really weird, and I'm very excited about it.
Okay, my prediction is that it does not get weird. Like I love the idea of adaptive user interfaces, and I have like talked about them with a lot of people over the years. I actually Dylan Field, the CEO of Figma, was on stage with me at South by, and he's like, I love the idea of adaptive user interfaces. And we talked specifically about styluses and pencils, and like, what if, as you were, sketching a design in Figma, the sort of UI was around your stylus was adapting to what you were doing, so you could just like move seamlessly. Like, this is a dream. This is a technologist dream. The idea that a bunch of app developers are going to flock to the broken app development model of the iPad and develop custom features for a pencil that is only available at the top end of the range. Look, David, I really want you to squeeze your way through a Spotify playlist.
I mean,
there's nothing I want more for you.
You're way overstating the amount of work that it's going to be. It's like setting up a keyboard shortcut to do this. Like, it's not hard work.
My man, Netflix wouldn't put a video player on the Vision Pro.
Yeah, I mean, fair, but also, A, you're right, and B, I would like everyone to email your favorite shortcut to Nilay at theverge.com.
I love it. I love a shortcut. I love them. Can't get enough of scripting my own applications to defeat the lack of cross-app interoperability on Apple's platforms. It's my favorite.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
This is the sort of thing where Apple makes a big promise about everybody supporting a thing, and then we wait.
Yeah.
And so I would just challenge you on the scale of, I don't know, dashboard widgets to the touch bar. Where do we think pencil squeezing support is going to land?
From like very bad to very bad? Is that where we're at right now? No,
so
I
think about some big Apple UI idea that it had. iPhone widgets.
Sure.
On your lock screen. Live activities and then dynamic island support. We've seen just a lot of support for that, especially as it came to the mainstream phone.
Very good.
Okay, so that's on the plus side. That's great. And then there's the touch bar. All the way over there.
The touch bar was awesome. Just nobody gave a shit.
Okay. Excited for you to use Spotify with your touch bar. Okay. I'm just saying that's the range.
Yeah.
Where do you put squeezing the pencil?
Closer to the touch bar. I mean, I think it's just true. Like,
right
it's not a mainstream accessory. I would actually like keyboard shortcuts on the iPad are actually probably right in line with the same thing, right? It's the kind of thing that are relatively cheap to add and relatively straightforward for users to access once they have them. But the attach rate of those accessories is not super high.
Yep.
Most apps don't really need it. Like, what you're going to see is there's going to be this set of like apps that use the pencil that are going to use the hell out of the pencil. And you're already all of the drawing apps. And like, I've just been talking to folks even in the last couple of days, like folks are psyched about the barrel roll stuff and just like the little creative abilities that you get just with the additional tiny features in here are like a big deal, but they're a big deal for a tiny number of features to a tiny number of people. And that's great, but I don't see a world in which the pencil is ever bigger than that. So I think the idea that like Spotify is going to care about it is not real. If a pencil came free, I would feel differently, but it doesn't.
Yeah.
I do love the idea that you go to events where people are sort of professionally obligated to like be kind to you and just have horrible ideas. And they're like, good idea.
It's so fun. It's so fun. I just pitch stupid products to people for like several hours and they go, haha, and then they keep giving me demos. It's great.
So that's the pencil. The one I'm really curious about is the keyboard, because my favorite plain computer of all time was a 12-inch MacBook, which was super light and thin. I tried to replace it with the previous 11-inch iPad Pro, which just turned out to like thick. Like, it was just like a heavy, weird, it just like wasn't as good as a laptop in many ways because of just the way it worked. Is the new keyboard case sort of better? They announced it as being more like a MacBook than ever, which I thought was really interesting.
The top half hasn't really changed, which I think is going to be its challenge. It's still, at least in the demos I got and the time I was able to spend with it, it's still a little wobbly, especially when you touch it. So it kind of wiggles as you move it around. The bottom, especially on the Pros, is aluminum. It's much more solid. It's really smooth. It actually like feels nice to rest your palm on, kind of MacBook Air-ishly. And the keys felt amazing. I've spent like 10 minutes on it, so I reserve the right to change my mind, but it was one of those keyboards you just put your hands down and instantly start typing on. I also really love Apple's normal Magic keyboard, so everyone's mileage may vary on that, but I think that's a great keyboard. And this felt to my hands just like that, which is kind of all you'd want for this. I always thought the iPad Pro's keyboard was a little like mushy and sort of thick. It just felt like you had to sort of smash the keys all the time. And then I spilled like half a Diet Coke on mine, and so now you have to really smash the keys. But this one, at least in the bits that I've gotten, felt fantastic. Like I instantly want it as just a little kitchen computer that I can just sit and like write emails while I wait for my coffee to brew. Like it felt great.
But I have a question. Which do you want more, this or a Microsoft Surface device? Because the whole time watching this, the whole time talking about it, talking even about the stylus, I was like, this just feels kind of like Microsoft in 2017 or 2018, right? Like when they and all the OEMs were really pushing like, yeah, look, it's a touchscreen computer. And I'm like, yes. Now Apple has done a touchscreen computer right down to talking about the processor, which they didn't used to do with the iPad. Like, this is just a computer.
Yeah, this was a speeds and feeds event. It was fascinating on that front.
It really was.
Super weird. Interesting.
So it's interesting. Back then, I think Windows was in a weirder spot. So they announced the Surface, and they were like, but then it's Windows. And Windows is in a sideways sort of fashion come a long way.
Yeah.
Like I would say it's in a different spot.
Right.
Is that spot ahead? It's more of a diagonal.
Yeah, yeah. They're just kind of
it's gone.
This way.
It's come a distance.
Yeah.
The direction I think is a question
unclear.
mark.
It's a good direction.
And I only say that because you can argue about what the evolution of Windows.
Yeah.
To contrast with the fact that the iPad is in exactly the same place as it was.
Yes.
I went back and I read my iPad Air review from 2013, which in a horrifying sequence of events, I forgot that I had written.
You're like, oh, this guy's pretty good.
Yeah, it's like, oh, smart. Snappy. Oh, that's me. There it is. And it is exactly the same. That iPad was running iPad OS 7. iOS 7.
Yeah.
In my review is like, this thing is constantly fighting you. They have not done enough with this software to take advantage of the larger screen. And it's just like plaintive. Like, why is Siri so weird on this? Like, why is it just a big iPhone? I read my iPad Pro review from 2018 the first USB-C one, and I'm like, why is this computer fighting me? Like, why is file management on the iPad so confused?
Yeah.
And all that stuff has gotten incrementally better. Yep, they've added Stage Manager. Shortcuts people, I'm so proud of you for writing an alternative operating system in Shortcuts on top of iPad OS. That is an achievement. That's cool as hell. That's like, I'm a computer nerd. I'm happy you did computer nerd stuff. But the ultimate problem, which is you have to fight the computer to get it to be a computer, like remains as true for the iPad today as it did in 2013 when I was running iOS 7.
Yeah.
And I think my answer to you then, given that question, is like, I'd rather take the weird sideways windows because at least it's going to do everything that I want it to do without some like
putting on armor and just going to war with your operating
just like
system.
running into like the brick wall of Apple's business model.
Yeah.
Right, Apple's like, we're going to distribute all the applications to the App Store. We're going to take 30% of all those buttons. And if we open that up on the iPad, then we're terrified that we'll have to open it up on the iPhone. We're already being brats about opening it up on the iPhone. Like, no, like it's going to be like this. This is the future of computing. And then you're like, is it?
Yeah, and it really doesn't. It feels just like they made a hobbled Surface device. Like, to be clear, my dream Surface device in 2018, but a hobbled Surface device, right down to the fact that you have to choose the processor, the storage, like the markups are high to make it functional.
So the thing we don't know,
weird thing.
The thing we don't know is like what's going to happen in June.
That's true. That's
when
true.
they rev iPad OS. And that's why, to me, David, I couldn't tell if while you were at the watch parties, and they had one in New York and one in London, like maybe the vibes are different all around the world. But for me, sitting at home, watching it in the glorious Dolby Atmos of my own home, Apple, by the way, did not stream this thing at any more than like 8 megabits per second. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
So it was not in Sony Bravia Core.
Yeah,
No.
it was at 48 kilohertz Atmos, which is great. But I mean, come on, where's the resolution, man? You're gonna show John Turnus whipping around the BART holding an iPad. I want the full. Anyway, I was like, man, like I can't wait until next month when they finish this product.
Yeah, like, exactly. It just felt like, okay, you've announced this thing that we've already seen before. We've already heard the pitch that this kind of computer is really good for creatives, because that was the whole pitch, right? It was like,
Yeah.
look, this is for creatives. And I was like, yeah, I heard that from Microsoft and HP and everybody else back in 2018. I know that now.
And you've heard that from Apple about the iPad.
Yeah. And like, okay, show me. And they're like, yeah, we did it. No, but show me where it's actually good for creatives now, where it's actually that useful computer. All you've done is like crush a bunch of stuff with a hydraulic press.
Wait, I want to come to the crushing.
We'll get to that. Yeah. That's
But
another
I'm
thing,
curious,
but-
David, if that came through at the whatever the. I mean, it wasn't like a full event, but I'm curious if it came through there.
I think it was hard to tell at the event whether this was the end of something or the beginning of something. And one way to look at this event is that essentially Apple like finished the job of the iPad, right? They said this over and over and over again. They're like, this is the magical pane of glass, right? Like that's the thing they've been wanting to build for a really long time. And like they built a really nice one. It has an outrageous amount of raw horsepower. It's really light. It's really thin. The screen looks awesome. Like you could make the case that they have been sort of working toward this particular iPad since the beginning of the iPad. And I think like they said over and over, this is the biggest day in the iPad since the launch of the iPad, which like objectively not true. But if you want to look at it that way, this is the end of that journey in a certain way. Like I genuinely don't know how much further you can push the actual details of the hardware here than what this is now until we get to like rollable displays and something else. Like this feels like an endpoint in a real way. Or the flip side is this is the thing that is going to empower all of the things that Apple's going to launch in June. And that was all the stuff that they were sort of intimating with the AI stuff and talking about the features and, you know, leaning on, we're going to have more to say about the future of the platform in June. I don't think this running Mac OS is the answer for the iPad. And there are a lot of people who are like, the evidence is everywhere. They're going to have Mac OS on the iPad. Like, no, they're not. It's just not going to happen. But if there is a next turn for what the iPad can be and do, and like a fundamental shift in the use case, that's when this feels like the beginning of something, right? And now they're like, we have a different kind of hardware with a different set of accessories and a different performance envelope that can actually go do all of this new stuff. And this is the story everybody has been telling us about AI for like damn near 2 years now, and none of it's really been true. So I'm not ultra confident that Apple is going to have like massively improved the state of the art of AI and has solved all the features for everybody in June. But this it felt very much like this is the vessel and we're going to fill it a month from now. And if not, this will feel like the end of an era of the iPad to me.
How does AI fix iPad OS?
Wait, I want to come to. I think that's where I want to end.
Okay, sorry.
I definitely want to end there.
Yeah.
I just want to, before we get to that, because I think that's the right place to end for sure. And I think that's another hour of the show. I just want to call out the biggest day of the iPad since the iPad. Off the top of my head, I can think of 3 more important iPads than these that like move the needle. The iPad 2, which was a shock announcement. And the design direction of the iPad 2 was basically the iPad until Monday.
Yep.
Like that 9th gen iPad with the Lightning connector, like slightly different design, but it's an iPad 2.
Yeah.
Yep.
They just flattened it a little bit. Like right, but it's the same exact home button, bezels, the whole thing. That's an iPad 2. And that iPad 2 launch, Steve Jobs on stage being like, I did it again. You saw the first gen iPad, here's the second one. And this is always my test. That shit made the local news,
Yeah.
right? If you want to break through in the mainstream, you need ABC7 in Chicago to be like, Apple announced a new iPad today. Like, you got to do it. You got to get there. The iPad 4, which was the Retina display and Lightning connector. The iPad 3 had a Retina display, but it was way too early. And it was thicker, and the thing ran so hot. The battery life was garbage. The iPad 4 was the good one.
Yep.
Huge, big deal. Everybody I know who had an iPad immediately upgraded to that iPad. And then the original iPad Air, where they changed it to the boxier design and they like gave it the extra capabilities. that was a big deal, which is why I was reading my 2013 review where they redid the form factor to make it that more square.
Yeah.
And a form factor change is always just a big deal. Right?
Like none of the ones you mentioned though were when they got rid of the button.
Yeah, because whatever.
You don't care about the buttons.
I believe that was the original iPad Pro.
Yeah,
That's
I think
the
you're right. I
2018
think you're
iPad
right.
Pro. And that one I would say was not as big deal because that's when they added the keyboard and they like got real surfacey. And I'm just using my local news test. That thing was really expensive. It tried to make it a laptop and did it work?
Did it go on the local news?
I'm just saying off the top of my head, well, if you're just ranking the biggest iPads, the things that made the iPad break through to the mainstream and like cause a fuss, it's 100% the iPad 2.
Yes.
Like easily the most beat. You're ranking the biggest moments for the iPad since the iPad. The iPad 2 is at the top of that list.
Yeah.
Without question. Then I think it is the iPad 4 when all of the early adopters of the iPad upgraded because the hardware had a new capability in a Retina screen that was worthwhile. Instead of the iPad 3, which again had a Retina screen but was also a tiny nuclear reactor. And then the iPad Air, which was the big form factor shift that everybody upgraded to.
Right.
And also passed the local news test. If Apple has a new iPad, it's thinner than ever before. Like that thing.
I do want to tell you that, in fact, the event this week did pass the local news test.
You're watching ABC7?
ABC 7 did, in fact, cover it. Oh, now it's covering the streaming bundle.
ABC7 in Chicago.
Just going. But yeah, they were just like, Apple unveils new iPad Pro with outrageously powerful AI-powered chip.
All right, I'm not going to tell you why I think about ABC7 News. It is what my mom watches.
Okay. But no, I'm with you. Like local news when it hits local news. So I'm genuinely surprised this hit.
They need something.
Yeah.
All right?
It was a slow news week for them.
I would just say that's my test. And that's to me is God bless the people at ABC7 News.
Yeah.
I'm in Chicago for New Year's every year and they do just a wild New Year's Eve thing. So that's why it's always on my mind. But it is true. That's the one my mom watches. But I think about that test and it's like, did this pass the test where a whole bunch of new people are going to pick an iPad, are going to buy an iPad. And I don't think this hardware is that thing.
No.
Maybe at the top end of the scale, a bunch of people are going to get an iPad Pro because they want to do a barrel roll. I'm that person. I'm not a tandem OLED. Yeah, I'm in. Let's spend the money. That's the thing I'm thinking about. And that's where I'm with David, where I'm like, you gotta reset your expectations of what the thing is capable of.
Yeah.
Which I think brings me to the commercial and all this talk about AI. Apple said 1 million times it's the most powerful AI computer you can get because of the M4. We've been doing the neural engine for years. Here's the thing in Logic where you can put in a song and it does the AI and it splits the stems into drums and guitars and vocals for you. That's cool. Here's some Final Cut Pro stuff. That's cool. By the way, Final Cut camera on the iPhone they announced, they just slid by that they announced pro camera software.
Right?
Just
for the iPhone.
moved through it.
That rules. Like, that's awesome. But, the thing's very powerful. And then they're like, we're going to have more AI features. You can see they're going to announce a ton of AI features at WWDC. And I think what is fascinating is maybe Apple's core constituency hates it. And then this ad just like lit the fuse.
God, the ad was like unintentionally a flashpoint in what feels like some sort of new class warfare.
Yeah.
Between like big tech and creatives. And we've been seeing it in Hollywood a lot, right? Like as Apple and Amazon and everybody goes and takes over streaming there, everybody's got really strong feelings about it. But to see it happen here, to see like Hugh Grant be like, "This sucks. You're destroying the world." That was a really bad Hugh Grant impression.
Yeah.
Sorry,
He's famously British.
he's famously British. I'm not. But
The opposite of British.
The opposite.
So the ad is a bunch of stuff, like beautiful old creative stuff.
yeah, it's like paint and phones.
There's
and
a trumpet, I believe, at the beginning.
A metronome, a sculpture that I thought was like a sculpture, and then it was clay because it just smushed all unsatisfyingly in the hydraulic press. And it was like a really good commercial, and it's the same thing they've done 1 billion times before, where they're just like, what if all of this stuff was in the palm of your hand? And everybody's like, F off.
Yeah.
How dare you? And because I think it was that image of things being all crushed.
Being destroyed, like beautiful things being destroyed
Yeah,
to make an iPad.
And everybody out there in the world is really upset. There's a lot of anxiety around AI in so many creative industries. So to have that happen, I was like, ooh, y'all missed the mark on that one.
Yeah.
Can I just say, I think the like overarching point of the idea that technology is like literally flattening creative culture, good and fair and valid and worth fighting about. The reaction to this commercial in particular is so stupid, and I just wish everyone would get over it.
It's so funny.
Like, I will say there was a great, I forget who did it, and I'm sorry I can't give them credit for it, but there was somebody who literally just ran that commercial in reverse and was like, this is actually much more compelling and sells the iPad much better that all of this stuff comes out of the iPad. And I think that's very funny because it was a much more like compelling and uplifting version of the thing. But also, like, the idea that everyone is like, Apple has always loved creatives and now it's destroying trumpets is like, come on, everybody. Like, nothing has changed. Apple is trying to tell you that there's lots of things that you can do in an iPad, and the fact that it smushed a trumpet to do so is probably fine.
The thing is,
it's probably fine.
Things have changed for a lot of folks, right? Like things have changed on the other side of it that was totally unrelated to Apple. Like it really was just Apple just like stepping in it without even knowing they were stepping in it, because out there in the world, people are furious at technology in general. And then Apple was just like, look, we did a cool iPad. And everybody's like, you'll die.
I agree with that. I think the broader story here is real, right? And Apple is out there talking about AI while everybody is rightly nervous about what AI is going to mean to their creative work. All that stuff is totally fair and valid. It just isn't about this commercial.
No, that's what I mean. I think the commercial is like, dude, in a month, Apple is going to announce AI features across its operating systems. Like huge, sweeping AI features. From the reports we've read, they're going to add the AI photo editing to photos. Mm-hmm. Just imagine the what is a photo conversation we're going to be having in a month when that stuff is built in at the system level to the iPhone.
4-hour Vergecast.
It's never going to stop. We're just going to start Vergecasting right after the keynote ends, and we're going straight on to the end of the year.
This is officially my 2-week notice.
Liam's out. But I mean, like, they want to add generative AI capabilities to the products directly. Mm-hmm. And I think what they just learned is even a hint of breaking creative stuff is bad for them. Like, I think the reaction they had is like, one, don't destroy cool things that we like. Like, David, it sounds like your disdain for trumpets is off the charts.
Yeah.
Some people think trumpets are cool. Right? There's ska bands across the world that are like, what are you doing?
David's like, no to ska.
Destroy all trumpets.
There's like a retro arcade console. Like it's just like cool stuff people like. And they're like, smash. We're doing one of those TikToks with the hydraulic smashers. And now here's an iPad, this like sort of soulless corporate pane of glass, right? You take that anxiety just around this ad, just around the imagery of that ad, and you you like point it at iOS itself in a month. And it's like, oh, that's a powder keg, actually.
Yeah.
It is. And Apple has been, I think, the extent to which it has misread the room about how people think about Apple, I think is what has been most telling about this. Because there was a time when Apple really did convince creative people that it was behind them, right? And it was making tools, even as it was disrupting the music industry and changing the way a lot of this stuff worked, people who made things used Apple products. Like overwhelmingly that was the case. And there was the sense that like this company made good products in the right way and believed in creative people and cared about this stuff. And Steve Jobs was a Pixar investor, like all this stuff. And I think between the way that Apple's business model has been sort of aired out like dirty laundry over the last couple of years, and the way we've come to understand what it does to developers, and the way that all of this stuff is just in general getting subsumed inside of technology, like there's the bigger story about what technology is doing to the world and to creative people that I think is interesting and important. But there's also a thing that has happened where people don't look at Apple the way Apple thinks that they do anymore. And I think to me, that was the thing that was most interesting about this, was a bunch of people who otherwise would have been like, oh, Apple's, one of the good ones. They actually care about this stuff. It's a huge tech company that actually like does the right things the right way. That company does not get the benefit of the doubt anymore.
Yeah. No.
And I don't know that that's coming back. And I think it's going to really hurt it with AI in a really big way.
The thing that I have thought about, the moment, like specific phrase that I've been thinking about during this whole commercial kerfuffle, which I agree is it's about something else.
Yeah.
Right? But I have been thinking a lot about Steve Jobs introducing the iPhone 4 And he held it up and he was admiring his own product in the way that Steve Jobs was wont to do. And he said, it's like a beautiful old Leica camera. And he meant it, right? Like he was like, I loved that thing and I made a thing that is like it. And this thing is actually meant to honor that thing. Right, you just go watch it. You go watch the iPhone 4 introduction. It's funny because he like dunks on Gizmodo at the beginning. I'm sorry, Alex.
It's fine.
Alex wasn't there yet.
I wasn't there yet.
But it's like, it's like a whole thing, right? It's Steve Jobs has to re-announce the product that has been so thoroughly leaked that it has already been disassembled on the internet. And he like does a great job. But there's this moment that makes it work, that like makes it click, where he's like, it is like a beautiful old Leica camera. And he's just talking about a piece of design that he loves that represents a way of doing things that he obviously respects. And that's now here's his iPhone.
Contrast that to buy your mom an iPhone. Like that's the journey.
But yeah, contrast that to buy your mom an iPhone. Contrast that to we're going to smash everything into an iPad.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, oh, now we're a bulldozer.
Yeah.
We're not a participant in this thing. Right? We're not going to honor the past of creativity with blah, blah, blah,
Yeah,
blah.
we've commodified creativity.
We're a bunch of accountants who are going to take our 30%. And that is bad. Like whatever it is, and I'm sure someone is going to write to me about Apple stock performance now. Like whatever you want to think about that. That's great. They're dominant. People love them. But they don't, the benefit of the doubt where the company was led by an artist or someone who held himself out as an artist or a patron of the arts or whatever is gone. Mm-hmm. And I think this ad is actually a reflection of that, right? It's an ad. It's a very expensive ad. But it's not born out of a love of those things, because if you truly loved those things, you would not smash them. And like, maybe that's just a metaphor. Maybe it's silly. Maybe it's just a misfire. But a month from now, they're going to launch a bunch of AI features that are trained on a bunch of creative work, and they're going to have to answer a bunch of questions about whether or not they paid for that training data, and whether artists are going to compensate it, and whether if you type into GarageBand, make me a beat in the style of whoever, that person gets money. And like, are you ready for this? Because the reaction to this ad suggests that you are not.
Yeah.
And the same is true of Google. Next week is Google I/O, where they're going to announce a bunch of AI, like, it's just destined to happen. Like I can confidently predict that Google is going to announce a bunch of AI stuff at Google I/O.
We're going to talk about Gemini a lot.
They're going to put Gemini in your face. And are they ready? Are they ready for that stuff? This week, OpenAI is the leaked details of how they're going out to publishers. And the publishers are like, you already scraped the data. This is a head fake. We don't trust you. And I think this whole industry is kind of like on a razor's edge. Like they don't understand that the lack of trust around AI is going to come to all of their products, including a relatively innocuous iPad ad.
Yeah.
Agreed.
100%.
All right. I'm very curious now to see what iOS 17 brings in. By the way, David, what is the evidence, real quick before we break, that's going to run macOS? Because that would be my dream.
I don't know. There's just I think a lot of people who are like, oh, the Magic Keyboard exists and feels more like a Mac. There's a bigger trackpad.
People just want it.
Thus, macOS. I challenge anyone to like try and think about how you would touch the things in your menu bar. Like, it's just not a good idea. We should have Mac apps that
this
work.
rules. I'm just poking away over here. This is great.
I'm trying to scroll down so I can get my menu bar.
No, as far as I can tell, there is no actual evidence except this thing is stupendously powerful, and when you put it in, it kind of feels like a laptop.
Yeah.
All right. No, that's my dream. If you're listening to me, Tim, I will trust you again if you put macOS in there.
It's a bad dream. Tim, don't listen. Turn off the podcast.
Tim is in our YouTube comments. He's like, first. That's him every time. All right, we got to take a break. We'll be right back. And then Alex is going to tell us about streaming. So buckle up. We'll be right back. All right, we're back. Alex, I feel like every time we talk about streaming, you say uncomfortably horny things about David Zaslav.
It's true.
So I would
genius.
I would like you to just assure me that that is not going to happen today.
I can't make promises.
All right. Well, I tried. I did my best to protect myself and our extended listener family.
You guys all love him too. That's why you're listening. Don't worry. I get it.
The good news is there's not a lot of direct Zaslav news.
There isn't. No, they had their earnings. Disney's had their earnings. A lot of folks had their earnings this week, and they're doing okay. They're making money, and that's because they have things like ads, and they're running these companies like businesses that have to make money now, rather than just like giving us all free content all the time, which was super sick. And I will miss those years like crazy. But the big stuff was like Disney, Hulu, and Max are all they're gonna get a bundle at some point this summer. Not your child.
You know, she walked up to the TV the other day and said, "Why is there an icon that said Max?" And I challenge you to explain that to a 6-year-old in a way that makes any sense.
First of all, kudos to Max. Can read. That rules. Great job, Max.
That's awesome.
Yes.
Yeah. Did you start explaining David Zaslav to her? Like,
I just challenge you to explain. Like, try. Be like, you're 6 years old. You cannot start with there once was a company called Time Warner.
That's what I was hoping.
Like you right? Like that. You're just like, there was a mistake. That's a mistake.
This is how you write a children's book for Max, just to explain that.
There was a mistake. Inside of that icon rests a 4:3 grayscale Batman movie. And I'm sorry, okay? Like one day I will tell you the story of the American economy and it will start with that icon.
But for now, don't worry about it, Max.
Okay, so this is where we get to Zaslav. Obviously, Zaslav runs Warner Brothers Discovery. He's been looking for money.
Yeah.
He's been looking for growth.
And what better way than to partner up with other companies who are also looking for growth and being like, if we get together, we can offer our stuff cheaper and also not have the FTC come after us constantly for having our own little like fiefdoms.
So they're going to bundle this up and say, is it going to be 2 different apps? Is it 3? So I guess Hulu is already in Disney Plus.
Right. Hulu's already in Disney Plus. That's why it's like that gross color now.
Yeah. They're just like, they smashed the blue and the green together. So you sign up. I read the press releases. The press releases are like, we'll release more details later.
Yeah, there really isn't a lot of details. It really is just like, it's coming.
Yeah.
We don't know pricing. We don't know when. We just know it's happening.
So you're going to pay some money to someone.
Yes. They're going to figure it out, Nilay. Like, David's very good at this. Zaslav, not Pierce.
And then you're going to, I feel like if David Pierce was in charge of Warner Brothers Discovery.
I was going to say, I honestly believe, like, to my bones, that I could run the streaming industry more successfully than any of these clowns.
Oh, you 100%. The user interface would work.
Yeah, I just let David do it.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. You're going to get logins to 2 apps. You're going to have 2 apps on your Roku still. We don't know.
We don't know. Yeah, we genuinely don't know most of this stuff. We know that it's coming. We know that they're excited about it.
I would say, by the way, that there is virtually no chance of this being a combined app. Like, just from what we've seen on the rights stuff alone, like Disney, the work they had to do to integrate the Hulu stuff with Disney Plus, and those are 2 companies owned by Disney.
Yeah.
Just the rights stuff that wouldn't allow some things on Hulu to be in Disney Plus. So there are things that are in Hulu, the app, that are not in Hulu, the tile, and Disney Plus. Like, imagine adding all of a whole nother company to that. I just don't see how that's possible. Like, this is good. They're going for unified login, which is a good idea, is like the most ambitious thing I think comes out of this.
But the entire idea of these roll-ups to begin with, Disney buying Fox, buying out the rest of Hulu from Comcast, disclosure, Comcast has a stake in our parent company, Vox Media, and also people hated Comcast so much they rebranded their cable company to Xfinity. That's a real story. They don't like me very much. There's a disclosure. And then Zaslav just zazzing his way to merging Warner Brothers and Discovery.
Right.
The idea there was always scale, right?
Yeah.
Like the specific pitch for Warner Brothers Discovery was, we will have HBO for your appointment Sunday night viewing, and then the rest of the time, when you're like, I don't know, what are those Property Brothers doing? You'll just like turn that on and watch TikTok in the background, right? Like, and they explicitly made this is the idea. Like, the bundle will be so big that you'll subscribe to it. It'll be great for you.
But bundles can get bigger.
And that's what this has run out.
Yeah. Basically, they need other content, right? Like, it is unrealistic to expect people to only watch Netflix. It is unrealistic to expect people to only watch Disney Plus unless they're like under the age of 5, in which case it's super realistic. But like,
did you see that stat by the way? 1 out of every 3 shows in Disney Plus is a Bluey stream.
Yeah.
Wow.
Is it just Max?
Wow.
Just
it's like 30% of all Disney Plus streaming is Bluey.
That's insane.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
It's like this company is extremely beholden to an Australian dog.
Wow.
I don't want to talk about Bluey at this time. David, your kid isn't old enough to know, but when it comes time, it will be very sad for you as well. But so the bundles get bigger.
Yeah.
But why doesn't Netflix have this pressure?
Because Netflix is huge. Like Netflix is bigger than kind of everybody else, right?
Right.
They have that first mover advantage, so they can just they're so far ahead of everybody else when it comes to subscribers and stuff that they can just keep doing that, and they can keep asking for more money. And also, this is the Alex who put them higher on the Go 90 scale than some of the other people. They've got hubris, right? Like they still haven't partnered with Apple, so you don't really get that that tight integration with like the Apple products that you get with Disney Plus and Max and all these other ones. They don't partner with everybody else as often because they are the biggest. And oftentimes when you do that, your hubris catches up with you eventually. So I think it's a kind of a mistake for Netflix to not try to do this, but I'm not surprised by it because it's also the most like these are entertainment companies.
Yeah.
Netflix is a technology company.
So you made a YouTube video this week. You basically like the cable bundle is back. And that's what's happening here, right? You got Disney, the Hulu assets. They're going to put ESPN Plus in the Disney Plus app. That's the cable bundle.
You're subsidizing all this stuff that you want that you don't necessarily want because I know you guys love sports.
But you have to. You are just like, ESPN will be here.
I'm furious that I'm going to have an ESPN on my Disney Plus.
Well, and we don't know what the pricing will be. And then you get all the sort of Warner Brothers assets now too, plus HBO.
Depending on what the price is, right? Like it could end up being that the price is the exact same. The only difference is that it's just more convenient to log in.
Well, so we do have this quote from Zaz. I'm just so worried about
Zaddy. There we go. Sorry, I had to do it.
I'm so tired.
If I ever meet that man, like I can't. I just walk away.
I won't let you. As somebody who's responsible for this newsroom and your friend,
He's like, no, we can't. Go that way.
It's just. Can you imagine having to work with somebody every day who's horny for David Zaslav? That's what it's like here at The Verge. All right. Here's the quote from Zaslav. It's like the New York Times is like dealing with Kevin Roose being like, I banged 18 robots on AI and we have Alex.
Just like, I
very
love
different.
it.
By the way, you should read the Kevin Roose article where he did make friends with 18 different
good.
AI personalities. And even from the jump, he's like, it's a little horny. It's like, it's good. Anyway, here's a quote from David Zaslav. There's a lot of irrationality in the market that's getting shaken out in terms of money spent. Ultimately, I think the business will look very different in 2 to 3 years. It will be much better for consumers. A lot of ideas in that quote.
Yeah, basically they're just bringing TV back. and in a lot of ways, TV is quite convenient. People loved it for 50, 60 years. It worked. And then everybody was like, we're tired of all the ads and everything else. And that's why we got streaming to begin with. And that's just what he's doing. Like, I think he's very right in that there are a lot of bad ideas and they are being shaken out. That's why everybody's going to advertising. That's why everybody is bundling. That's why everybody is subsidizing sports and all of this other stuff. But I don't know if it'll be better for consumers in 3 years.
I think the one other thing that's worth mentioning here is it's very telling to me that what he says is in terms of the amount of money spent.
Yeah.
And I think if you want to talk about what's different about Netflix versus these other companies is Netflix can afford to exist. Whereas you have Disney, which spent way too much money to acquire Fox. You have Warner Brothers Discovery, which took on a massive quantity of debt in order to become the company that it is. These companies literally cannot afford to exist in the way that they currently work. Whereas Netflix, I think it was in 2020 or 2021, announced basically like, we're good. We have enough money now that we don't have to take external financing. And that puts you in such an unbelievable position of power to be able to just do whatever you want because you can afford your business. And what no one else has proven other than Netflix is that this is a business that you can afford.
Or that has the margins to let you grow, right? Like Netflix is actually maybe the easiest way to talk about this is the Go 90 scale of doom streaming services. Mm-hmm. So Netflix to me, I know Alex.
I'm on the other side, but I get it.
Completely thinks Netflix will fail. But by the way, disclosure, I produced a Netflix show. It's called The Future of. It's very good.
Yeah, likely story you support them, huh?
They really did rebrand it Xfinity because everyone hated the Comcast brand. So that is a true story. I heard it again recently. I put Netflix at 0. By the way, the Go 90 scale, if you remember Go 90, it's Verizon's failed streaming service where they thought children would join, quote, gangs. No, it's a cruise. It was something. They thought the kids would rotate their phones 90 degrees to watch YouTube, and they had no idea why anyone was watching YouTube, and it immediately failed.
Quibi before Quibi.
It was a lot. Now, to go 90 means to die. This is Vergecast lore, if you're unfamiliar. So the Go 90 scale of streaming services from 0 to 90, you put them on a scale. 0 is alive, 90 is dead. Netflix, in my mind, is 0.
Right now,
It is the one you don't quit. No one churns off of Netflix.
right now it is 100% 0. I would agree with you there.
I will say, Alex said it was a 40 at South by Southwest.
Yes.
less
It
than
is
2
a
months
40
ago.
in my heart and in the future. It is
'Cause you think
0 right today.
Because you think the hubris makes them brittle. I understand the argument,
Yeah.
but I just don't. I think Netflix is very good at programming its service exactly to make you never churn. They're like, here's one more John Mulaney special. Like, they're
Bridgerton's
great at
coming,
it.
man. I'm
right?
so
They're-
excited.
It's just always, they're always doing that thing.
Yeah.
You're like ready to quit, and they got one more thing for you. Good. They figured it out. Data. HBO, or now Max, whatever the hell it's called. Like, Max is 45. Like they hit 100 million subscribers globally, but they're about to hike prices again because of what David is saying. They cannot afford to run this business. Its programming is all over the place, right? They have HBO's programming, but HBO's in one of its sort of like consistent sort of like dry spells. I'm sure there'll be more stuff coming back, but that's the history of HBO. It runs hot, then it runs cold. There isn't some like consistent slate of programming.
Yes, there is. Those Property Brothers, people love.
Well, there's that stuff, but there isn't like the.
I mean, that like we can't ignore it. It's something that maybe we don't talk about like critically, and you don't see people talking about it on threads and social media and stuff. But that is a big part of their business. That's why Zaslav could afford to buy Warner Brothers, is because of how big that business is for him. And that's not going away anytime soon. He's really
But that's
good
the
at it.
Discovery business.
That's the Discovery business. That's now in Max.
Sure. Okay, I'm just saying 45.
Yeah, I
Because
know.
you're not running around trying to make a deal with Disney if you think you're more alive than dead,
Yeah.
is just my belief.
Well, this is why the sports race is so intense right now, because I think the Property Brothers will keep people subscribed to you. They're not going to win you vast tens of millions of new subscribers.
But I also want to be wary of saying that this deal is an indication that Disney and Max are struggling. Because I don't think, I think this is as much about dealing with the fact that these are highly vertically integrated companies, and there's currently a government that doesn't like that. And it's really useful to be like, no, we're partnering together.
You think that in the absence of Lena Khan, Disney would buy Warner Brothers Discovery?
If Lena Khan got sucked up by aliens tomorrow.
If Trump gets elected.
Yeah, and they manage to sell ESPN so they can make all their money, they would buy it in a heartbeat.
No chance. No chance. With what money?
I said I had to. That's why I put those clarifiers on there, right?
Let's add your debt to our debt, and we'll give you $50, and then we'll all slowly die together.
Wait, actually, David, when you describe it like that, that does sound like the media business.
that is.
That does, in
how it
fact,
works.
sound
Not wrong.
how these CEOs think.
That is basically
let's
fair.
lay off 10,000 people and have a bunch of debt. Somehow we will get boats. And is Zack Snyder available? Because we have a number of movies that should be recut as grayscale squares.
Hollywood is built on debt. This way the financing has worked in Hollywood from the beginning is on debt. Nothing is ever made with like the cash they have in house.
Yeah.
It's made with.
But usually the assumption has been that the properties will make money.
Yeah.
A problem that they are having. Anyway.
I think they'll be fine.
Okay, so I'm putting Max at 45. I'm putting Disney at Disney Plus at 45. That's my Go 90 scale. I think these things are wobbly in the middle right now.
No, Disney is massive, and like streaming is a big part of Disney's business. Streaming is not all of Disney's business. Of all of these companies, it is super positioned because it's got a ton of very lucrative theme parks throughout.
I just want to point out that technically the Max app has already gone 90 several times as it is
Repeatedly.
rebranded from HBO to HBO Max.
Every
to
other
Max.
month it goes 90.
Like it keeps going away in some
Yeah.
way.
Well, I think this all sort of revolves around Netflix in a funny way, which is why Netflix is so powerful in all this, because I think the case for Disney Plus going away is that Disney decides that actually, if we want our theme parks to succeed, the best way for us to do that is to sell shows to Netflix and not put them on Disney Plus, which I think is a not crazy conclusion to draw in a couple of years. You're going to decide it is so expensive and so wasteful for us to run our own service. What we actually need is for people to watch our stuff. And the way to do that is to put it in movie theaters and put it on Netflix. And I think it's possible that that is where this goes.
We come back to this at the end of the summer, if and when we find out whether or not there will be more Bluey episodes. Because I honestly think, depending on that answer, Disney Plus goes in one of two directions. If you just look at the scale of how much that business is currently dependent on Bluey, it's not dependent on whatever horrible garbage Max watches otherwise. So there's a show about the children of the villains. It's bad. All of it's bad.
Descendants. Why do I know
I've never
that?
seen anything worse in my entire life.
I've never watched it.
It's fun. It's like very safe if you have a 6-year-old girl. You're like, watch this garbage. It's better than what's on YouTube Kids. But I'm saying, depending on how Bluey goes, we should come back to that conversation. Okay, we should take a break. I will call out, by the way, that Sony is in the middle of discussions to buy Paramount.
Oh, I hope not. Because it's with Apollo Management, right?
Yeah, that's just layoff city. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah, that's
all
horrible.
the headlines about Sony and Paramount should be like, Sony discusses laying off Paramount's employees.
But they're still also in talks with Skydance, which is owned by Larry Ellison's son from Oracle, and that could still happen. That's the one I'm mainly rooting for because I hate watching companies be bought up and broken apart.
You love CBS.
Also, is it really because I'm concerned about Star Trek? Yes.
There's a very good episode, by the way, of The Town podcast where they talk about this and basically land on, if you want good content, root for the Skydance deal. If you want a bunch of Paramount shareholders to make money and then all of this to go away, you should root for Sony and Apollo.
Yeah.
I'm like slightly simplifying, but not that much.
Yeah.
That's 100% correct. If you want Star Trek, root for Skydance. If you don't care about Star Trek and Taylor Sheridan's ranches, root for Apollo and Sony.
Wait, that's a bad mix of things to care about. How do I get one but not the other? Okay, we got to take a break. We're going to come back with the lightning round, which has to be lightning because we are so over today. But it's going to be really long. We'll be right back with the Vergecast. All right, we're back. It's the lightning round, which really for me is what I have taken to calling the victory lap round. But let's begin with Alex Cranz.
Yeah. Not a victory lap.
This is sad.
For mine. Yeah, no, this is a bummer. Microsoft is currently going through it. Tom Warren had a really great piece up this week, and Ash Parrish, our game reporter, had a really cool follow piece on it. They've been closing studios. They've been laying people off. They had a big all hands after they closed this one studio that made this really popular game last year called Hi-Fi Rush. If you haven't heard about it, that's because you don't play video games enough. Hi-Fi Rush was like a big indie darling. And it was widely well received. It did really, really well for them. And then they said they laid off they like closed the studio, they laid everybody off. And they were like, yeah, we need to make more games like that. And it's like, well, maybe, And so there's just a lot of chaos over there. And I think it's the same thing we're seeing. You know, we've talked a lot about creatives in this episode. It's that same anxiety. It's the same issues that we're seeing with streaming where these people have spent a lot of money on acquisitions and growing during the 0% interest rate days. And they grew a whole lot. And you can't grow in, like, infinite content has to have infinite people watching it and paying for it. And we don't do that in this human life.
It is a remarkably similar trajectory. Like Microsoft saying, okay, we think this is going to move from a you buy a thing model to a subscription model. Thus, we need a lot of content. Oh God, we need a lot of exclusive content to, okay, maybe actually there aren't as many people who want to pay for all of this, especially given what it costs because all this stuff is expensive. Bail. And then, so you go from like, we have to grow to the size of the universe in order for this thing to work. And then you realize, oh, it's actually not possible for us to grow to the size of the universe. In the same way that everybody thought they were going to get 1 billion subscribers to streaming services. Like, no, it turns out there is kind of a local maximum to that. And
people are finite, unfortunately.
Yeah, and it turns out, I think Microsoft is going through the same thing now where it's like, okay, if we build this unbelievable war chest of content and people and talent, it will work. And then all of a sudden everybody's like, oh, that's not a plan? That's nothing? and it all just kind of collapses. And it's really sad because it's happening at like unbelievable scale and pace right now.
And it's also in an industry that I think was already unsustainable to begin with crunch and everything like that. Like this was an industry that's been creaking for a decade, and it's having a massive moment, and it sucks for all the people involved, but like it's happening.
Yeah. I just want to point out that Microsoft fought tooth and nail to buy Activision.
Yeah.
And they were like, this will grow our business. This is the thing. And really the question we should ask with all of these deals, how many people are you going to lay off? How many is it? It's always some.
Wasn't it T-Mobile that said in buying Sprint that it thought the number of jobs were going to go up, and everybody's like, "Oh, sick!" And then they immediately let off thousands.
Immediately.
Yeah, like that's not true. It's never true.
And it's just like, it's the thing. Like you combine two companies, there's going to be overlap. It's going to happen. I interview a lot of executives. You can just see the wheels turning. Boy, I don't need double the back office staff. Like whatever. You can just, and they call it efficiencies, but it's really layoffs. And that's just like how it goes. And then on top of it, Microsoft was insistent that it needed to buy Activision because it was winning while Microsoft was losing. And they bought Activision, and they're like, look at all these losers. And it's like, we should start asking the questions ahead. How many people are you going to lay off? That's the only question, right? Like, that is the policy consequence of allowing these mergers at scale. Like, really, truly, on the ground, a bunch of people are going to lose their jobs. How many is it? And if they're not willing to answer that question, I honestly think like we should no longer give any of these companies the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, you don't get to just buy it.
Yeah. I would point out that AT&T buying Time Warner did allow Zack Snyder to employ a number of people to make a 4:3 grayscale Batman movie.
Yeah.
Nilay, do you get a cut of sales of this movie? Like, what is happening here? We've officially tipped from like this is funny to like what's Nilay's angle here?
I want to hammer it home for people that the Trump administration getting rid of net neutrality allowed AT&T to buy Time Warner, and now there is a grayscale Batman movie, and that is a direct line of events. By the way, net neutrality did pass. They got rid of the weird rule that would have allowed for 5G fast lanes. We now live in a world of net neutrality again. It's great. Sorry, Zach. All right. Victory lap 1 complete. Victory lap 2 for me. This is the whole lightning round. Just Nilay was right about you. I'm sorry. You will recall that Epic Games sued Apple for antitrust violations long ago. They mostly lost that case.
They did.
They mostly lost that case. I would say they might have set the stage for the current DOJ case, for other cases. Or they made a bunch of arguments that are now being made again by the government in different
They got a ball rolling.
Very much got a ball rolling. The one thing they won in that case was the judge applying California law, because I think the judge was unwilling to rewrite United States federal antitrust law, but the judge interpreted California law to say Apple could no longer prevent app developers from what's called steering. So Apple has these things called anti-steering rules where you're not even allowed to mention that there's another website where you could buy stuff. Anti-steering rules struck down. I have the specific quote here. Apple is permanently restrained and enjoined from prohibiting developers from including in their apps and their metadata buttons, external links, or other calls to action that direct customers to purchasing mechanisms in addition to the App Store. That's the rule. Judge passed this rule.
And Apple's response was to allow a app or a link rather.
Right. So the rule comes out, and I wrote a piece back then, 2021, saying Apple's about to end up in a fight over buttons and links. Like, they're not allowed to prevent buttons and links from going to external purchasing mechanisms. When courts write two nouns, they often mean for the nouns to mean different things. So now you have buttons and you have links. That they necessarily mean different things. This is just legal interpretation 101. I would say the AstroTurf Brigade attacked me. Some developers tried this. They went in front of the court again. The judge said, look, stop it. Like, we'll figure this out when we get there. Apple has to issue its entitlements and do all this stuff. And then everyone thought I was wrong. This is true. This is like a real sequence of events that I'm very hot about. The point of all this is Epic went to the judge recently and said Apple is only allowing one external link to a fixed web page, and you are not even allowed to say it's cheaper on the web page. Like, all of the rules about what you're allowed to do to get around anti-steering are basically anti-steering.
It's such a punk.
You're basically allowed to say, this is a website.
Yep. And it's at the very beginning of the flow. So if you have an app with other things you can buy in it, you are not even allowed in that area of your app to put links to an external website where you can buy stuff.
It's beautiful.
You are allowed to have one link. That link, when you click on it, if you're logged into the app, can't even pass your login info to the website.
Yeah. I always think of the Kindle app as the easiest way to explain this, because it's like the way it should work is you should be able to go into, the way it should work is you should be able to buy Kindle stuff from your, but there should be a link on every book that says buy this on the web. That is explicitly against the rules. You can have one link in one place in the app that says books on web. That's basically the entirety of what is allowed.
Yeah, or sign up on web, but not for 30% cheaper, or not it's cheaper on the web because Apple charges us a fee.
Right.
None of that's allowed.
Do they get the preposition? Like, is the preposition allowed, the on?
Apple's totally in control of this. Oh, by the way, if you click the link, you get a warning screen that says you're leaving this app where Tim Cook will protect you with sword and shield.
Just a buff Tim Cook picture.
This is all true. So Epic drags Apple back into court because the judge in 2021 said, I will decide if Apple's in compliance with my injunction. Not Apple. I'm going to decide. So Epic drags Apple back to court. There's a hearing this week. I just want to read you some things that were said in this hearing to Apple as they talk about buttons and links. And this is to an Apple executive. Is it fair to say in today's day and age that everyone understands that www.url.com is an external website on the World Wide Web? That's just a question. Like, do you really think people are this stupid, Apple? Pete, in society, people make lots of purchases on the web all the time. Would you agree with that? Yes. And they understand that Apple trusts its users that the web is separate and apart from different, even on an iOS device, right? Yeah. Do people know that clicking on a link taking you out of an app takes you out of the app? That's where Apple is in buttons and links. And then there's the judge who interjects in the middle of a conversation about button design because Apple has constricted the design of buttons. I can't imagine a logical reason why Apple would demand that of competitor apps. What's a logical competitive reason for not suggesting but demanding it other than to stifle competition? I see no answer. Can you give me one? Buttons and links.
Did they give them?
It took 3 years. No. Just blah, blah, blah security.
Oh.
It took 3 years. But Apple is now in this fight over the design of buttons and links in its apps because that injunction is actually a big deal. And they have not actually provided a reason why they are constraining the design of buttons and links in their apps, which, by the way, are different. A button is supposed to just do something. A link takes you somewhere else, right? So these are different in terms of construction. And I think Apple and its hubris, all the stuff we've talked about, they've run into the judge saying, no, I meant something when I issued this order. And you can't give me reasons that are not just straight anti-competitive, malicious compliance reasons. I don't know how this is going to turn out. It's just an evidentiary hearing right now. Maybe the judge is going to find Apple's not in compliance. Maybe this DOJ lawsuit is going to break it all open. I don't know, maybe a bunch of Europeans are going to hurl cheese at Apple until they stop it. Something's going to happen. But I'm just saying that right now, 3 years after the Epic case, Apple's in a courtroom defending its own malicious compliance because it was inevitable that the buttons and links conversation would come back around.
And it's been interesting to watch these fights get more and more specific over time, too. And I think this is the thing that is actually going to affect real change, right? Like we talked about this with the emulators the other week.
Yes.
That as these things get whittled down from these sort of big philosophical debates into like, here is a thing about the experience that is broken, and you can't explain to me why it's broken other than you believe you deserve all of the money. That is actually the way that Apple is being pried open, and it is happening like in these little tiny pieces much more quickly than it's going to happen in some grand you're not allowed to be like this anymore way. So I think it's like the death by 1,000 cuts thing is like very much underway in a really fascinating way.
Yeah, and this stuff takes time. Like the DOJ lawsuit, that's a decade.
Oh, easily.
It's a decade. Like you can decide whether it is good or bad. You can have whatever feelings about the complaint you want. A decade from now, we will see the results of that case on how the devices we use. It took 3 years from the Epic case for us to be back in a courtroom saying, actually, your weird link entitlement idea might be anti-competitive. And that still has to play out. So you need some patience here. But I agree with you, David. It's like, it's starting in a way that Apple can no longer defend.
I just spent a lot of this time on Meta AI, trying to make it show me images of a shredded Tim Cook protecting people from buttons and links, and it wouldn't do it.
I went to www.url.com while we were sitting here and discovered that url.com is for sale. So that's cool.
I just think if you have your executives on the stand and the question is, people in society make lots of purchases on the web all the time. Would you agree? And the answer is yes. Like,
You're probably done for. Nilay, in the spirit of kindness, I would like to bequeath you my lightning round because you have another victory lap I'd like you to take.
I do. I'm very excited about this one. I'll make this one quick because, again, in this victory lap, nothing has happened. So we'll end the show where we began.
In Wisconsin.
In southeastern Wisconsin, where I was a child.
Were the cheese curds really squeaky?
They're good. They're good everywhere in Wisconsin. They're particularly. Well, Madison. I would say Madison is where I enjoyed the cheese curd lifestyle the most. Okay. But President Biden was in Racine this week. He was announcing a data center to be built by Microsoft. It's going to be 2,000 construction jobs and then 2,000 permanent jobs to build this data center. This is, I would just say, politically opportunistic at its finest.
Yeah.
Microsoft had already purchased this land. They had already announced the data center. They'd already done all the permitting, all the stuff. Joe Biden just showed up and was like, look at the jobs I made. Great. I'm super excited for, do politics. I'm happy for you. The point of this is that they are building this on the land that was supposed to be the Foxconn site. And Joe Biden's political opportunism is he's standing there and he's like, literally, I think he said something along the lines of Trump didn't give you any jobs and I'm giving you actual jobs. Because it's the Foxconn site where Trump waved a golden shovel around and promised an LCD factory that was supposed to bring 13,000 jobs to this region. And we at The Verge, somewhat famously, always knew that was a lie. Reported on it quite a bit. We won an award. Josh Sheza won an award for his big feature on it. That feature actually, Chris Hayes read it on MSNBC last night. Like just straight up, he was like, Biden announced some things. You might remember this as Foxconn, and then just read some of Josh's feature to the camera to explain what had happened. There are rules. Congratulations to Josh. He reported the hell out of that story. The victory lap I would like to take is to remind everyone and to initiate our newest members of the audience. During that period of time, while we were doing all that reporting, I received a number of hilariously threatening emails from anonymous Foxconn executives telling us, reminding us, insisting that we leave them alone. Literally, the emails would say, leave us alone. And then they would try to explain to me what Foxconn's AI plus 8K plus 5G strategy was.
Galaxy brain
It was nothing. By the way, Foxconn has abandoned AI 8K plus 5G. This is true. They've abandoned it. If you go to the Foxconn in Wisconsin website now, which is literally, I believe, just foxconninwisconsin.com, you can see they have a new strategy, which is 3 plus 3 equals infinity. This is true.
That's even worse. How did they make it worse?
It's 100% true that their new strategy is 3 plus 3 equals infinity. And then there's a lengthy section of that website dedicated to how you can see the dome that they built from the highway. I don't know what to tell you, man. They built a little dome. It's like, I keep calling it Temu Epcot. Like, it's a little baby dome.
Baby dome.
It was supposed to be the dot of an eye. They were going to spell Foxconn, FII, Foxconn Industrial Internet. They were going to spell it in buildings. And
it's a lot of letters.
It's only 3. They only got to the dot, which is the dome. They insisted for years, this is true, that the dome was a data center. And I would have various conversations with like data center people. To like, would you ever make a data center in the shape of a dome? Do you think that would be? And they would all be like, no, I don't know. We wouldn't. It turns out the dome was just like a party center.
Yeah.
It was like where corrupt Wisconsin politicians would have drinks and take photos with
the dome.
With their dome. The dome remains. That whole thing remains. I don't know what's going to happen there. There's some rumor they're building servers. Microsoft is now taking all of the industrialization that was built up, the water, the power, to build an AI data center.
All right.
But I want to end here with one of the best things that has ever happened on the show.
Okay.
Which is all those emails I got about leaving people alone. I would read them on the show, and then people would make memes and songs.
Oh.
And one of my favorite songs, which I thought about today as I watched Joe Biden dunk on Trump and his golden shovel, I was like, it would rule if Biden would just play this song that Vergecast listener Jackson Hayes wrote for us about the factory. Liam, can we play the song?
Nilay, you didn't listen to me. But that's okay, because we're gonna tell you what you already knew for months. You didn't leave us alone, leave us alone. You didn't leave us alone, leave us alone. AI meant new generation, mobility and self-driving cars. Wait, is that the story we were running, Jeremy? Okay. AK means smart safety and security through AK technology. I mean, come on, Neil, you should know this. 5G means pioneering, medical solutions? What crap is that supposed to mean? On some health cloud network. Okay. You didn't leave us alone, leave us alone.
It's catchy.
It's good.
You didn't leave us alone, leave us alone. It was just AI, AK, and 5G. Well, I see how that was hard to believe. You didn't leave us alone.
It's a bop.
Leave us alone. You didn't leave us alone. Leave us alone.
Now, I just want you to imagine.
Hey, you win.
Can't make that on an iPad.
Well, with the power of AI technology, you can. So thank you to Jackson, one of my all-time favorite Vergecast moments. I hope you're listening. I just want you to imagine Joe Biden announcing the Microsoft deal and then being like, as a reminder.
Busting out his acoustic guitar.
He just take a seat.
That whole sequence, I just want to remind people that sequence of reporting was like mid-pandemic. This was the weirdest time in reporting you could do, and we were reporting on this weird factory that didn't exist, and I was getting these crazy emails.
Just leave us alone.
Just leave us alone.
That was awesome.
Leave us alone. Anyway, it's a data center now. There's a little dome. You can go look at the dome. I have pictures of the dome. They're on the website. That's it. I think that's it. One thing we didn't talk about, TikTok sued the government over the bill to quote-unquote ban TikTok. We wanted to take some time with that, so that will be next week's Decoder. Alex Heath and Sarah Jong are going to join me. We're going to pull that whole complaint apart and see where the arguments are good and bad. We just needed to take some time with it. Also, there were iPads. Come on, it's a Vergecast, everybody. That's it. That's a Vergecast. Rock and roll.
And that's it for the Vergecast this week. Hey, we'd love to hear from you. Give us a call at 866-VERGE11. The Vergecast is a production of the Verge and Vox Media Podcast Network. Our show is produced by Andrew Marino and Liam James. That's it. We'll see you next week.